What is up, everybody? Welcome to another Saturday morning of college football here on RotoGrinders. Happy to be with you, as usual, breaking down the college football slate. We are full on into conference play now. I am feeling better this week after a rough go last weekend, so refreshed, recharged. We're into October. We're into fall. It's officially the heart of football season. I am Justin Van Zuden, a.k.a. STL Cardinals 84. I've got Micah Bedard alongside me. And Micah, how you doing?
Doing good. Like you said, it feels like football season in Houston. I know it is not crazy, but I walked outside this morning. It's 55 degrees. So that just tells you that fall is here. So October is also when you start to get conference play. So looking forward to today.
Yeah, we got frost here the last couple of nights, so it's wild to experience the seasons changing, and of course, prayers to anyone on the East Coast that was affected by the hurricane this week. It seems like that is finally making its way up the Northeast and losing its danger as it goes. But to everyone, particularly in Florida, that may have been impacted, we hope everybody is okay. Just some really bad flooding scenes down there. So hopefully everybody's all right. And hopefully we can use college football as an escape from some of the sadness and we can get some lineups in today. Of course, with the early slate on DraftKings, always including the noon kickoffs, that means a lot of times we get a lot of Big Ten games. And there's some ugly ones today. So there's some games on the DraftKings slate. We've got Navy and Air Force on there as well. Even though it's the usual 13-game slate that we have on DraftKings, it does feel like maybe the options are a little more condensed today because there's just some crappy games on the slate.
Yeah. I mean, originally, it's tough, especially I'm usually building between, 100, 150 lineups a week. So my player pools the first couple of weeks have been, a lot larger than they were last season. I'm like, why is that? And then I forgot. It's because once you get in the conference game, you get 3 or 4 Big Ten games on the slate, or you even get Navy Air Force today that you can pretty much ignore. So player pools are a lot more condensed this week. And yeah, I mean, DraftKings is never going to change, so I don't even really get upset about it anymore. Like, they're going to put those games on the slate. It's just a fact. And so you can just make it easy on yourself most of the time. Not to say there aren't any options, but I mean, if you are stacking Michigan and Iowa this morning, if you have any Spencer Petras lineups today, you need to reevaluate what you've got going. But yeah, a little more condensed player pool, which I like. It kind of for a GPP player, you can kind of focus in more on spots when, like last week, you had probably at least half of the games had like 55.5 point totals or more. So it lets you condense down a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure. And as far as the injury news, again, not a ton. We've knock on wood, we've gotten fairly lucky. The biggest concerns probably reside with Maryland. It sounds like Tagovailoa is good to go, but the coaching staff is kind of still calling him a game time decision. So we've got to keep an eye on that. In addition, Jarrett, one of their top wide receivers, is a game time decision today, and that game is not until 3:30. So that's one tricky spot that we have to navigate. Aiden O'Connell for Purdue is listed as a game time decision, but is fully expected to go. A tough matchup for them, though, against Minnesota, who has the best defensive numbers in FBS so far in terms of yards allowed per game. That is a noon kick. So if you are interested in O'Connell, who is admittedly cheap on DraftKings, we should know that before the games kick off. But the biggest situation to monitor for the later games is certainly with Ole Miss. With Maryland. As far as Ole Miss goes, that was another situation that we were monitoring earlier in the week. But it sounds like Zach Evans is good to go. Judkins was going to be a really popular value if he was out, obviously. Your takes on some of these injury situations and maybe something that I might have missed there.
Yeah, you pretty much summed it up. Judkins was going to be I mentioned in my article, and obviously you write that and you just don't know what's going to happen. But I think right after I published it, they said Zach Evans is going to go today. So yeah, if he wouldn't have, Ulysses Bentley, I don't think we've heard about him, but he was banged up too. So Judkins got every carry. So now it's more of a stay away. The one thing is Donovan Edwards is expected to play for Michigan this week. Last week we mentioned on the show, he was ruled out Basically the perfect scenario for Blake Corum as his backup fumbled 2 plays in. So Corum got every single carry against Maryland. A little bit different of a matchup this week, especially with Edwards back and like really these early games, outside of Oklahoma, TCU. I'm a little underweight on Texas Tech, Kansas State, which we'll get to. But the Baby Tua says he's 100%, so it's very weird why his coaching staff is saying he's a game time decision. So I don't know. Get ready this afternoon. I think you definitely need to be by your computer if you've got a lot of lineups in. Anything can happen in college football, so you just got to get ready for it.
Yeah, if you're planning on getting some exposure there, it is definitely worth keeping an eye on and adjusting those lineups. Unless you're just planning to stay away regardless, which if you can't be at your lineups to adjust them, you got a birthday party or something going on this afternoon that's going to keep you away from your computer, I would probably avoid that situation just to be safe. Though, I understand it's certainly ideal to get some exposure given the matchup if the primary players are healthy there. All right, let's start going into the quarterback position today. Interesting pricing. Again, I think because of the nature of the slate, we are kind of going to see ownership bubble up. Bryce Young, once again, the most expensive option on the slate. We've got Dylan Gabriel, we've got Jordan Travis, and we've got Sam Hartman. Those are your 4 quarterbacks above 8,000 on DraftKings. All have their own merits, but your thoughts on when you factor in price, how you handle those top 4 QBs today?
Yeah, Bryce Young is just in a dream matchup here against Arkansas. They've got shredded by basically everybody that they've played against. Although, Texas A&M, you just can't even compare them to anyone else because their offense is really bad right now. But other than that, you saw Cincinnati and other teams like that have came in and had a field day on Arkansas. We saw Bryce Young on a slate earlier this year. He kind of busted against Texas, but I think in this one, he's definitely a top option. And then kind of like last week, right? Dylan Gabriel and Jordan Travis are kind of right below him. I think, they're kind of in no man's land there. Oklahoma lost last week. Dylan Gabriel, we really have not seen that ceiling with him yet. But I think this could be a game where it shoots out a little bit, and I like him. Jordan Travis, the same thing. He's been banged up, hasn't had to use his wheels as much as he needs to. But we'll get to the running backs. Trey Benson's probably going to be pretty popular for them. Min price running back. So Travis could definitely get a couple of those touchdowns in. I don't mind him. Then Hartman, we were on him last week. He's 3% owned. He had put up, I think, like 37 fantasy points. He's in another good spot as well. So all these guys are viable. I don't think, from an ownership perspective, people get too chalky. I'd probably think Young is going to be around 20% or so just because there are so many punt plays at running back and receiver that you can fit him in, and his wide receivers really aren't expensive. So my preference up top probably is Gabriel. He's a good GPP pivot. I do have some lineups with Young and Gabriel in them. I think that's definitely going to set you apart in tournaments.
Yeah, that definitely will set you apart, even though it is possible. I mean, there's enough punt value to make that work today. So that, I think that's a legitimate strategy that you can use because most people are certainly going to go in the mid-range with one of their choices. I think Adrian Martinez is interesting. Deuce Vaughn is going to be fairly popular. If Martinez happens to call his own number like he has been, if you're out on Vaughn, you can play Martinez to help leverage that in GPPs. You've got Donovan Smith in there. We know he's going to get plenty of pass attempts. You've got Daniels for Kansas, who's been great. You've got Tagovailoa, again, presuming he's healthy, in a prime matchup against Michigan State. It seems like Daniels is going to be the guy that most people go to, which is, it's weird. If you would have told us all a year ago that Kansas quarterback would be the most popular guy on a slate against Iowa State, we probably would have looked at you with crazy eyes. So, is this the spot to maybe get away from Daniels a little bit, as scary as that is?
Yeah, so all these guys have some question marks here, right? Donovan Smith, I mentioned it. I'm on the under in Kansas State, Texas Tech. This is like a letdown spot for both teams coming off big wins. And Texas Tech, although there are Zach Kittley offense, they're running the most plays in the country, but they're only averaging like 4.5 yards per attempt and, yards per play. So I'm a little bit I'm underweight on basically all those guys from Kansas State and Texas Tech. Daniels, man, I mentioned in my article, I don't think he's chalky enough just to full fade. I will probably be underweight, but this feels like a too good to be true scenario. He's played so well to start the season. I've been going back and forth with him basically all weekend. So I still think he's a good play. Same thing with Baby Tua. So looking at the weather, and I don't think it's too crazy in college football. I never look at the weather too much, but it has been raining there the last couple of days. Remnants of Hurricane Ian are just to the west of that, and it's supposed to be raining this whole game. So that is one thing to think of when you're talking about playing Baby Tua. Also throwing the fact that he might not play, I think his ownership comes in a little bit lower than that. KJ Jefferson and Max Duggan are in two good spots there. Just because, I have a rule in Lineup HQ that every KJ Jefferson lineup has to have someone from Alabama. Because if Alabama does come in and just smash here, then I don't really want KJ. But I think definitely he's got the only chance for Arkansas to keep this game close. Then Duggan, last week, if you played Duggan.
That was wild last week.
I mean, and it's something I took him out of my main lineup on Fanduel, and it didn't really kill me because he didn't really do too much. I actually swapped him for KJ. But yeah, Chandler Morris is ruled out. All of a sudden, he comes out for warmups. So that is college football DFS to a T. Will Rogers and Spencer Sanders are also options here. So a lot of guys, I think a lot of people will pay down. No one's going to be – I don't see anyone over 30%. So I don't think there's anyone you really want to avoid. Will Rogers is just tough against Texas A&M with no rushing upside. And then Sanders – I'm debating back and forth on him too. Baylor's defense didn't, they do look good, but Sanders has really looked good. This is his first trip on the road, so kind of have to make a decision on what you think he's going to do there.
Yeah, I'm interested in Sanders. Tough matchup, but another spot like you mentioned it, where potentially he could use his legs a little bit more. He's cheap. He's not mega chalky. I'm in on Sanders today. It's certainly not a play you need to make in cash games or anything like that, but in tournaments, I do like the upside at that $6,500 salary today. So Sanders is kind of my flag plant in that range. And the reason why he's not necessary is because the whole world is going to go to Deckers at 5,800 as the obvious value. Certainly can't argue with it because like Kansas, they're much improved offensively, but they can't play defense still. So basically, a lot of their games are going to be primed for shootouts. Deckers is one of the cheapest starting quarterbacks on the board. And look, we've got him projected at almost 25 fantasy points, which is basically the same as Jordan Travis and Hartman and Adrian Martinez and all these guys that are priced like $2,000 higher than him. So Deckers is going to be your chalk play, and I certainly get that, but I don't mind Sanders in GPPs. Your thoughts on the cheap range? There's not much else down here besides Deckers.
Yeah, shout out Ben. We're not going to talk. Well, the only time I'll talk about Graham Mertz is to say don't play him. But yeah, not a ton to love. Hunter Deckers is the clear choice here. I'm not even going to talk about really anybody else. That 2% on Tommy DeVito is interesting. I think that's probably 2% too high to play him there as well. But yeah, Deckers, Kansas's defense is just not good. And so this game should shoot out. Deckers is too cheap. I think in cash, you basically have to go Deckers. Not to say, I say have to, but he's an easy value, as you mentioned. So pairing him with Xavier Hutchinson only costs you about $14,000. And that's just a clear number one receiver to pair with him. So I like Deckers in cash and single entries. I think in single entry, Deckers is going to be 30% plus because I think, the value just stands out.
Yeah. No argument against Deckers from here either. Anybody else at quarterback that's even worth our breath here?
No, I think we covered it. Deckers
Agreed.
Is the lowest I'll go.
All right, let's go ahead and move to running back now. We've got the usual kind of pricey options. Ibrahim against Purdue, Allen against Illinois. Again, those are two lower total games, but these are the Big Ten guys. They're going to run the ball. Chase Brown for Illinois. We know he's going to get the ball. Eric Gray, the workload is still a bit of a question mark, but he projects well today. And then Gibbs for Bama, another wild card that kind of everybody expected for him to be the next big running back there at Alabama. Maybe as conference play gets deeper and the games get tight, maybe he takes that next step. But certainly, nothing that's completely obvious as this is the guy at the top here today. How are you breaking down this top group?
Yeah, I mentioned in my article, Ibrahim last week, they blew out Michigan State and he just didn't get the touchdowns, right? You need Ibrahim to get you 3 touchdowns on the ground for him to be viable. It sounds crazy. Like, hey, if you tell me a running back gets you 100 yards and a touchdown, you're usually pretty happy. But that's just not going to pay off for Ibrahim here. He's always live for a ceiling play, but it's, especially depending on how you think this game goes, his options might be limited. If the passing game steals a couple touchdowns from him, he's not going to pay off. Braylon Allen is really, I like Braylon Allen a lot. That 9% is definitely attractive in GPPs. I think he maybe comes in a little higher than that. I mean, it was weird. Wisconsin and Ohio State, although that game was a blowout, both teams played their starters the whole game. So I don't know if that was a little bit more of a chess match or something like that. But Allen still put up 30 points against Ohio State, losing by 30 points. So now he gets a positive game script. I love him in GPPs. And then, you kind of get that range with Gibbs, Gray, and Brown where they're priced up a little bit. Gibbs has not done anything all season. You got to feel like this is the game he kind of breaks out. They've been saving him. Last week, I think, I didn't play the night slate, I guess, but he wasn't doing anything against Vanderbilt, and people were freaking out, asking whether or not he was playing. So he's not going to get all the work. Jace McClellan's been getting some of that as well. But, Gray and Brown are kind of in no man's land. What you talk about for GPPs is good. Man, Deuce Vaughn, kind of tough for me. I'm a big Deuce Vaughn guy. Last year when he was on the slate, you played him every time. But you mentioned it earlier. Adrian Martinez has taken away a ton of his upside. I mean, Skylar Thompson last year would kind of be a threat, but no, Deuce was getting the ball in the red zone. I mean, Martinez is pulling it every single time. So Vaughn scares me a little bit. He's also not getting the work out of the passing game that he's been getting in the past couple of years. So Vaughn is usually a lock for my main lineup. I'm a little bit iffy on him this week, and I think it's a tough call for me, just being a little bit underweight on that Kansas State game. But Martinez, and I would not play Martinez and Vaughn together because last week was like the perfect scenario, and it still didn't work out too well.
Totally agree on not playing them together. And I mentioned at the quarterback position, I'm fine using Martinez and GPPs. I think he gets enough touches that Vaughn is still safe. I mean, particularly at 7,200 in a game that should feature quite a few plays. I'm fine with Vaughn, but do agree not using them in the same lineup. Evans is interesting. Everybody was looking to go value there. If he was out, I know the matchup is tough. You don't really want to target guys against Kentucky. But Evans, any interest in Evans?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a Zach Evans stan to begin with, but I said this same thing in the article that if he was ruled in, I mean, no one's going to play him at that. And he has been splitting snaps, but once again, this is probably the first time that we've actually seen him in a close game atmosphere. So what's going to be the split? Judkins probably still will have some ownership, but I like Zach Evans at that 4%. If you told us before the season starts, you get Zach Evans at sub 5%, you'd be all over that. So yep. I like him in that range for sure.
All right. I totally agree. I think he's a great option there in GPPs for sure. Because A-Chain is going to get all the ownership in the 6Ks. There's all sorts of question marks on workloads, split backfields, tough matchups. And you see a lot of these guys project similarly in the mid-teens. And then we've got A-Chain at 24. And there's just going to be value there for Texas A&M with no Aniyah Smith until we see how that offense kind of shakes out and the pricing adjusts. So A-Chain, the clear chalk in the 6Ks. I presume you agree with that. And thoughts on any of the other guys in there?
Yeah, A-Chain is just a misprice. And so I say it all the time. Like sometimes you just have to plug him in and move on. I mean, that 33%, I'd be surprised if he's not higher than that. I'm probably going to have at least 50 to 60% of him. Trayshawn Ward is interesting, as we'll get to when we get to the value backs. He's definitely splitting some. He's not getting all the work with Trey Benson. They've both been playing great, but Ward is 3K more. He's going to come in unowned here. If he gets a couple of those touchdowns and Trey Benson, that's what I said is 3K back. I really want, not to say Benson's a bad play because I will have some of him, but there's a lot more pass for him to not get there at 3K. Especially as a running back. Richard Reese was a great example last week. Is people played him and he barely got there and he still split some time. But same thing with Toafili. Toafili's going to get some work here too. So these guys are all risky. Definitely would only play one in a lineup. But Trey Benson is dirt. That's a misprice, I think. I don't know. It's kind of tough to say. But I like Ward just as a GPP play because no one's going to have him. And then in that mid-range also, Dylan Johnson, 5.6K from Mississippi State. He's more of a passing back than a running back, but he's an okay play there. But yeah, really with Ward, I think he's good for GPPs because a lot of people are just going to go and punt with Benson. But Chris Rodriguez, so he's back this week for Kentucky. Man, he's scary to be underweight on because you saw last year how good he was.
Yeah.
And now this is just, what do you think is going to happen? Like I mentioned it. Do you think that Rodriguez is going to come in and be the number one guy and get 20 carries out of the gate? Or do you think he split snaps with Smoke? So I'm going to take a shot on him here. Fanduel, he's very cheap, so I'm definitely more prone to play him there. But Chris Rodriguez is back, and Jarrell Brock is going to be the chalk of the slate here at 5.4K. I'm a little weary on him as well. I just think there are a lot of options around him, and Roman Hemby is a great pivot off of Baby Tua. In the passing game, we saw him in week 1 really make that passing stacks irrelevant because he got all the touchdowns. I don't know what you think about Brock. I mean, the problem is how are you going to play him? Are you going to play him, Hutchinson? I'm interested to see what like single entry looks like because I think you will see some lineups, and rightfully so, play Deckers, Brock, and Hutchinson.
Yeah.
But you're depending on a lot there. You're basically banking that they're going to score like 35 points, and all those guys are going to count for all the touchdowns. But man, if Deckers throws 2 touchdowns to someone else, like it's just he's not risky. I would say he's going to get all the carries there. But for GPPs, I just at 40% price. 40% owned. There are just so many other options around him that I'm a little bit weary on Brock for GPPs.
Yeah, might help you min cash. The cash game lineups are pretty easy to build today. You're going to see a lot of like 2v2s and stuff in cash against other sharper players. But in GPPs, I don't think it's the right move to play all of those Iowa State guys together. In fact, I think maybe the move is to not play Brock and you play Deckers with, and even if you want to play Hutchinson, that's fine. Pair them with 2 guys. And then, hope they go for 350 passing yards and 4 passing touchdowns or something like that. But I just think it caps your ceiling a little too much, unless we get a 68-65 triple overtime game or something like that. Or whatever the overtime rules is. I think you just play 2-point conversions. It's a video game at some point. I can't remember if that's 2 or 3 after 2 or 3 overtimes anymore, but I don't like it. But anyway, that's beside the point. I just don't think all those chalky Iowa State guys together in the same GPP lineup, I just don't think that's optimal in most iterations of this slate being played out.
Yeah, you think about it. If our ownership and the ownership projections are really, besides Charlie Jones being 40% when he's projected for 20%, which I don't think anyone can fault. When you talk about those 3 guys, that's 100% ownership between those 3 guys. So you're going to have to really, like, if that is successful, you're going to have to get really different elsewhere to not be duped. So, that's just one thing to think of. Like, my cap, I think, for ownership today is like 185%. So if you say that, like, more than half your ownership is gone to those 3 players.
Is that normal for you, that kind of number, or you usually go higher or lower than that?
What I really do is I don't put any kind of cap in there, and I just kind of build my exposure. I'll just basically, when I go and do my initial build, I'm really just going to set my exposure to players and then just see what it looks like, right? So I think when I started generating, it was like the highest I was getting was like 200 something percent, 210. And then I just look at the lineups. And so like once I fall into that category, I just kind of back into it. So it's not a set number. Like I'm usually never trying to go 200, but just kind of look at your builds because 200, the ownership, max ownership cap is very helpful. But also if you think about 85%, that could be a bunch of, 15 to 18% guys. So I always look in it too to make sure I've got some lower owned ones. But that's just, I just kind of back into it week to week and just kind of see there. Like I would say one of my rules too is to not have Hutchinson, A-Chain, and Brock all in the same lineup because I think that's just once again eating at yourself, and it's just not not something I'm going to do in GPP.
Yeah. So if I just run our optimal lineup now in Lineup HQ, you can. I'm not sure how easy this is to see on the screen share, but
yeah,
you can see that the optimal lineup has a combined percentage ownership of 225%, which again, there's a lot of chalk out there today. And if you wanted to play somebody other than like Holden, you could get that number probably closer to 240. So in case you're not familiar, what Micah is talking about is setting this slider here under your build rules where it says max total lineup ownership. And this is helpful for GPPs to get away from these lineups where you have 200+% total ownership. I mean, you can see in this lineup, I've got 21, 40, 25, 24, 47, 33, 26. Like, obviously, you probably don't want all of these guys together in a GPP lineup. So if I set my lineup max total lineup ownership to say, let's just do 170, and then if I tell it to produce 10 lineups, and then let's do that here. Now, I haven't changed any other. I'm on factory settings other than just these changes we've done right now. Let's see. That's still the optimizer. So you can see this first lineup it generated, total ownership 167. Next one's 165. Next one's 169. Next one's 165, 168. So it's working within my constraint there of 170% total lineup ownership. And you can see it's still giving me some chalky players in some of these lineups. Deckers, Deuce Vaughn, Hutchinson, who we'll get to, A-Chain. But then you've got some lower owned guys in there like a Holden and Zach Evans, who we just talked about. So that's how doing that, setting that max ownership slider to a bit of a lower number can help you avoid lineups full of all chalk. So
Yep.
I thought that was just a good thing to show there quick and a good point. So, all right, let's wrap up and I've clicked way too many things too fast. Let me refresh here. Anyway, as we go towards the value range of running back, who's kind of standing out for you there? And I'll scroll down there once I get this reloaded.
Yeah, not too much here. Judkins is going to be a really good play at 5K if Evans is out. My sleeper of the week at running back is John Lee Eldridge for Air Force. When you look deeper in the stats, like Brad Roberts, they had him on the slate a couple weeks ago. I think in GPPs he's still viable. But Eldridge is averaging 10 yards a carry, just hasn't gotten the end zone, had played every single snap. I think he has that one snap last week. So once again, you see that 0% owned. I mentioned this in the article. You can have 2, 3, 4, 5% and be double, triple the field. So not a cash play. Do not come at me when you say, hey, instead of playing Trey Benson, I played John Lee Eldridge. Then that's fine. But I'm going to have some of them in GPPs. And then Trey Benson's probably the lowest. Well, obviously that's the lowest you can go at running back. Another misprice at 3K. I do question, this is in Discord. Do not come and ask if Trey Benson is playing after the first series, because I guarantee you he's not going to get the first carry out of the backfield. That's going to be Trayshawn Ward. So Benson is not the number one guy here. So he does project well. Wake Forest defense is not good. But once again, he's going to share snaps with two other guys. So could he break? But he's averaging like 7 yards a carry. So you are banking on him breaking a big one, which could definitely happen. And if he breaks a big one, you probably need him to jam everyone else in. But he's a misprice when you see all those other guys barely projected. So he is in a timeshare. So just be aware of that. But I think he's still a good play. From a floor perspective, I bet you he has at least, 50 yards or so. Just does he get in the end zone? Does he get in the end zone twice? Because then he really becomes like a must-have. But he's definitely worth a punt, and especially if you want to get some of those higher-priced quarterbacks in your lineup.
Yeah, not much else in the total punt range for sure. I think we've hit on most of the guys. Did you have a take on Miller? I think he's 5,200.
Yeah. Miller did get a good bit of carries, and it's weird he's $2,500 cheaper than he was last week. I'm going to have some shares, but I think Oklahoma rolls in this one, and so I don't necessarily want, from a game script perspective, I'd rather have Duggan and maybe a couple of his receivers than him. Once again, he projects well. He did well last week, and he's $2,500 cheaper, so wouldn't fault you for playing him. He's just not going to be a real priority for me.
All right. Yeah, no strong take here either at that price. Other options in there, but a decent pivot off of Brock if you wanted to get away from him. All right. Let's go a little backwards with the receivers. So salary, like we mentioned, and Mike had talked about at the start of the show, going with that double stud QB build. Part of the reason that's viable today is because there's so many cheap wide receivers, and I'm gonna sort these by points per dollar. So you've got Banks at 3K, who feels like not to the Charlie Jones level, obviously, but a clear misprice after his game last week. You've got Evan Stewart, obviously, after Smith's injury for Texas A&M at 3,600. Braden Johnson projects really well. He's 4,300. And you've got other options. Miles Price at 5,400 feels cheap. And you've got some other 3K options in here. Like, there are so many. You can get I think the obvious build on DK today is going to be Hutchinson and 2 punt receivers. That's what most people are probably going to do. It's going to leave the mid-range pretty well under-owned. But let's talk about these cheap guys first and how you kind of grade them out today.
Yeah, let's look at those because I think Turtle got a question in Discord this week about Matt Landers. Like, Matt Landers has not done anything all year. How does he project so well? Well, because those 12 points from Matt Landers could easily come on 1 catch for 50 yards and a touchdown. I mean, he's not going to be – all these Arkansas receivers are spread out target-wise, but Landers is the definition of a boom or bust play. You know, he could have 2 catches for 20 yards. He could have 2 catches for 100 yards and a touchdown. So – that range with him, like when you compare him and Banks, right? Banks got 7 targets last week, caught 2 touchdowns. Like, from a floor perspective, even though Banks projects worse than Landers, I would say Banks's floor here is probably like 6 or 7 points. Landers' floor is probably 2 or 3 points. So that's Jamal Banks. Once again, I mentioned it. He's just a price mistake. You know, last week, you know, and he's playing a bunch of snaps. He's taken away from A.T. Perry. But when you compare those guys, just want to put that as a frame of reference. Like, Landers is probably a good pivot off of Banks and GPPs because you see that ownership, right? 2%. But Banks is definitely like your safer cash floor play. And then Evan Stewart, you mentioned Anaya Smith's out. He's too cheap. Braden Johnson, if you're going to, you know, you can pair him and Spencer Sanders for $10,000 or something, right? So, and Corey Dyches, you know, we talked about it. Baby Tua loves his tight ends. So there are a ton of value plays. I'm probably not playing JJ Sparkman. That just sounds like a bad time. So, but anyone else here is definitely viable. But I think it's important to talk through when you look at that point per dollar, just how different of plays these are. And then you see Hutchinson, who's going to be the chalk of the slate, and rightfully so. I mean, he's the number 1 guy. If you're playing cash, I think you basically have to play him. But yeah, it's good to kind of go backwards and see because we did it last week, right? What are the 3 guys? And I think we basically nailed them for cash, who they were going to be. And Hutchinson, I agree with you. Hutchinson and 2 punts or someone below 5K is definitely going to be the cash and single entry build.
Yeah, I didn't remember taking this approach last week. Frankly, I don't remember anything about last week's show. I was just trying to survive. And we did that. So that was mission accomplished, but able to think a little more clearly and add some additional thoughts on today. And I just, with this slate, like, okay, my cash build is, say, Banks, Stewart, and Hutchinson, like, makes total sense, or something along those lines, depending on how you spend at the other positions, obviously. And you know, we'll work our way into the middle, but you don't have a lot of options here at the top. Like, Hutchinson just projects so much better with his target share. Obviously, Mims too, but he's $700 more expensive. But then you've kind of got a dead zone below those guys. Like, if you want to play Alabama wide receiver roulette, Perry is certainly fine, but you know, maybe a few more mouths to feed in that passing game right now. So you're just going to see all that, everybody at the top going to Hutchinson, maybe to Mims as a GPP pivot. And then those cheap guys. So do you have any other thoughts on these kind of top end guys? And then we'll work our way into that mid range.
Yeah, all this really shows you is DK just does such a terrible job at pricing wide receivers. You know, you see on FanDuel where like Mims shouldn't be 8.5K. Hutchinson, like, those should be swapped, right? Like, Hutchinson should be 8.9K or something here. And then you see like Micah Pittman, you know, I don't know how he is. It's not even like last year because he didn't do anything last year. So you can't say the DK algorithm. Presley, Burton, I think, is a good play for GPPs. He's one of these Bama receivers is going to go off. It's just anyone's guess. Like, literally, their targets could not be any more spread out on the season. And yeah, I don't like anyone else up here. A.T. Perry is a good GPP play with Banks. I think you can play a lineup with Banks, Perry, and Hartman if you want to. But you see him 7.2K, caught a touchdown last week. But honestly, Perry last week was getting held Clemson's strategy was, let's just PI on Perry every single time and make someone else beat it, which wasn't that bad of a strategy. They won. But Perry, I like him for GPPs here at the top.
Yeah, I like him there as well. But obviously Hutchinson is the cash game play. We talked about Alabama wide receiver roulette. I am placing my chips on Holden today, but that is largely a hope and a dream. Not a whole lot of rationale behind why that's the case, but 5,900. He's kind of the choice in our projections, so I'll roll with that. We hinted at Charlie Jones earlier in the show, so tough matchup against Minnesota, but for some reason his price is down to 6,400. You've got the Maryland guys in here. You've got Jaden Reed, who's going to look pretty decent at 6K. So this is the spot maybe where you could make or break some GPP lineups. I mentioned price a little bit ago as well. If you get the one guy in the 5 or 6Ks that goes for 125 yards and 2 touchdowns today, that could be the play that helps differentiate your GPP lineup. So who are some of the guys you like in here?
Yeah, I like Quentin Johnston for TCU as a rebound. Last week he got 7 targets. He just didn't do anything with them. So he's a good bounce back, especially if you like Gabriel, which I do, and bringing him back with Johnston. I mean, he is a boomer bust guy because, I mean, TCU spreads it out a ton, but Johnston's your best bet. Man, Charlie Jones. I mean, it sounds like O'Connell's going to play. I'm going to have some. Is this another week where we see Charlie Jones be like 30? Like, no one has done any, like Minnesota, I think, didn't give up like 100 yards to the starters in Michigan State. Like, is Charlie Jones with a backup quarterback last week? Charlie Jones still put up 10 targets, 5 catches for 2 touchdowns. So, man, I think you can have Jones here. He's a lot safer. It was gonna make me feel a lot better if he had a backup. But Kobe Prentice is another guy. I wouldn't play him and Ja'Cory Brooks together because it sounds like when you look at snaps against Texas, and it looks like him and Brooks are kind of alternating. So, but Prentice, no one's going to play him at 6.3K, and he's definitely going to start. And I mean, he's a true freshman, so I don't mind the playing GPPs. Raheem Jarrett, we mentioned injuries, and that's one thing to note.
Yeah,
I think Jarrett's been practicing, but he has a head injury as opposed to Tua. So if Jarrett is out, Dante DeMuse becomes a really good play. And I like DeMuse as a play anyways, just from a talent perspective. But these Maryland receivers, we talk about them every week. If Jarrett is out, that's a big bump to probably both Copeland and Jones. I think Jones's floor is pretty solid, but DeMuse is going to get a big bump if Jarrett is out. And then Deitch, as we mentioned, him at tight end, he becomes an even better play. So be weary of that. I think Jarrett has practice, and they said he's 100%, but just dings. Honestly, I hope Jarrett's out because with Jarrett in, I mean, you got anyone.
It's just so tough to peg.
Yeah, and so it's just like Alabama. So you've got 2 really good. This slate's interesting because you have 2 quarterbacks you really want to play in Baby Tua and Young, but then it's who do you pair them with? And so that whoever finds the answer to that question this afternoon will probably be taking down some GPPs.
Yeah, for sure. All right. As usual, before we get out of here, we'll take a quick look at the late games that are on the Fanduel slate. I'll load them up, and we'll take some questions as well if you got them in the Discord chat. Murdog is asking Ben, but nobody wants Ben's opinion. I'm just kidding. Who the best cheap wide receiver is for cash. I'll let you take that question as well. Of those kind of 3K punt receivers, who's your favorite guy in cash games?
Oh, man, at first I thought that was pretty easily Banks, but I think for 600 more, Stewart's a good play. I'll probably go Banks just because I think his floor is pretty solid.
Yeah, I like him in cash as well, though I'd probably pivot to one of the other guys in GPPs. All right, the 4 late games that are on the FanDuel slate and also part of the DraftKings night slate, you've got LSU, Auburn, West Virginia, Texas, NC State, and Clemson, and Indiana, Nebraska. Not the most exciting slate of games, though I do really like the Indiana-Nebraska game. Indiana has sneakily been running a lot of plays this year. Neither team has a dynamite defense, so I think that game is definitely viable. Casey Thompson at 8,300 on FanDuel, I think you could use as a GPP quarterback for sure. But all told, not the best set of games. You do have Bijan Robinson, of course, for Texas, though he is pricey on FanDuel. Let's see if I sort by projected ownership. You can see. I'm going to refresh this and get a bigger table. Scroll down, I can get a bigger table. You can see who the most popular options are in these games, but basically it's going to be Bijan Robinson plus a lot of guys from that Indiana Nebraska game. So your thoughts on these later games?
Yeah, I was thinking this is going to be a FanDuel experiment because usually guys on FanDuel are not as owned as they should. like Cam Camper should be 40% owned. Trey Palmer should be 30% owned.
Because people who are building on both sites aren't really thinking about these games as deeply.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting about the FanDuel slate? They don't have Kansas, Iowa State. So that was an interesting, because I kept being like, okay, Jaden Daniels, why is he only 12% owned? And I was like, oh, that's LSU Jaden Daniels, not Jalen Daniels.
Yes, I've gotten them mixed up about 6,000 times already this year, so you're not alone.
Yeah, so yeah, I thought it was going to be sneaky. We'll see how sneaky it is. But I mean, Nebraska is giving up like almost 600 yards of total offense to their FBS opponents this year. So Indiana should be licking their chops. And Cam Camper, like, you know, the guy got 19 targets against Cincinnati. Like, him at 8.5K is, you know, that's, just think of equivalent if this was a DraftKings slate, that he was 6.2K on DraftKings. I mean, he's still mispriced. Trey Palmer's getting all the looks there. I agree that last game of the slate between Nebraska and Indiana, I have the over in that one. The over 61 points. I would say, if like, I mean, that, I think that total should be closer to 70 points. I think that is a much too low numbers. We've been able to get some good over-unders on the year, just because lines haven't really adjusted yet. But Bijan, we mentioned him last week. Why the best? You know what the best defense for Bijan Robinson is? Giving him half the snaps.
I was going to say his own head coach.
Yeah, I mean, and he even got there last week. But I mean, why 4th and 1? You're running Roshan Johnson in the Wildcat. Like, what are you doing? But yeah, he's 11K here. Maybe this is the week with, and then on the slate too, Quinn Ewers is not going to play for Texas, so you got Hudson Card again. Xavier Worthy is also probably going to be out. So Jordan Whittington and Jatavius Sanders are good options there for Texas. They're not going to necessarily project that well, just because receivers just never really project that well on FanDuel, just because you're going to get that half point PPR instead of the full point. So, and Tariq Milton, the Iowa State transfer, I mean, he's dead min price there. But I think Jatavius Sanders is a good play at tight end, and Whittington as well, if you want to play Bijan. And then West Virginia's got a couple good options, because Texas defense has been so bad. You know, we've been talking in the Discord about him this morning, is CJ Donaldson, true freshman, easily the best running back. You have two. I almost was going to play Donaldson and Bijan in my main, and then I was like, well, now I'll be tilted over one of them. I don't want both of them. I don't want both of them to be my lineup, because Donaldson, you know, he's a true freshman, so the fitness might not be there per se, but him and Bijan are definitely alternating snaps. But this is a good game to target. I mean, it's got a pretty, I think it's like, total I think is like 63 in this game. So it's really kind of awkward to me, at least, for this total to be higher than Indiana, Nebraska. And then, yeah, LSU, Auburn, and NC State, Clemson. Kayshon Boutte is 6K. I think he's 6K here. Just nuts. Like, if you would have told us before the season, of course, me being a homer, I've got my LSU shirt on. But, I mean, yeah, 6K. So I think on the night slate on DraftKings tonight, he's like 3.2K. The issue there is that Jaden Daniels is a one-read quarterback, and if that's not there, he's taken off. But, yeah, Boutte being that cheap is ridiculous. But LSU's defense is legit. Auburn, at first I was a little hesitant on LSU covering, but Auburn's offense is atrocious. So, and then NC State, Clemson. I am not an NC State guy. I think they're overrated, but I also think Clemson's a little overrated. So, man, that's kind of just a stay away.
Yeah, not a whole lot of ownership in that game.
Yeah, I mean, Shipley, you know, even though he got banged up, played a bunch of snaps. Kobe Pace might be a little bit hurt too. So Shipley's my only player in this game. So yeah, not the best, but the late night hammer, of course, how my DFS college football started this year. NC State and Clemson will shoot out, and Indy, Nebraska will be like a 20-17 game. So, but yeah, that's definitely of those 7:30 kicks, definitely your least appetizing one. But we got a different. It's 10:15. You shouldn't be muted, or did you do that yourself on this one? Getting different time frame now.
Oh, did it at 9:30, did it 10:15. Am I back?
Yeah, now you're back.
It's every 45 minutes instead of every hour. Who knows? I don't know anymore. As long as I'm back. We got a handful of questions in the Discord. We'll get through those. We'll get out of here. Achilles is asking if Charlie Jones is going to play. I haven't seen anything indicating otherwise. It's the quarterback that was questionable. Unless, have I missed something here?
Yeah, I don't had me questioning whether I missed something. But I think it's O'Connell. I think he's out there for warm up.
Yeah.
So yeah.
All right, roll through these questions. FanDuel cash question: Robinson or Ibrahim from NBA DFS?
Ooh, man, that's tough. I mean, I think you can play both because FanDuel you can play whatever lineup you want. But I'll go with Robinson. I think with Worthy being out, he's going to have to handle more of a load, and it's a much better game environment. So I'll go Bijan.
Agreed. Carolina guy asking single entry favorite quarterback receiver stack on FanDuel. It's a little tougher on FanDuel without the Iowa State game.
Yeah, I think Thompson and Palmer is my favorite stack because Palmer can also get. I mean, Thompson can also get there with his legs, so that's probably my favorite stack, and it's pretty affordable too.
All right, DK Cash, Miles Price and Stewart, or Banks and Charlie Jones?
That's for Cash. Miles Price and Stewart.
That's going to be I bet that's a common question. I bet a lot of people are wrestling with Banks and Jones or Price and Stewart.
Yeah. Man, I would probably say Banks and Charlie Jones. Like, even though Minnesota is like the worst matchup you can have, I mean, Charlie Jones is not going to see less than double-digit targets. Yeah. Maybe they get double teamed, so I'd probably say Banks and Jones.
Yeah, I would agree. And keep in mind, Micah's been relatively speaking, anti-Jones through the first few weeks. So with even him saying that one, I think that's your play there. Yeah. Let's see. Daniels and Young or Hartman and Sanders in GPPs?
Man, I probably like Daniels and Young. I think they have a little bit more upside. I mean, Sanders, like, I think I agree with you on Sanders. Like, there is a chance that, you know, he kind of shoots out there. But, I mean, Daniels has a pretty solid floor. Both those guys, Daniels and Young, have a pretty solid floor.
All right. Last question, I believe. BHB, DK Cash, Deckers with Braden Johnson or Duggan and Stewart? I think that's Deckers and Braden Johnson for me.
Yeah, that's where I'd go to.
Yeah. All right. Then everybody's trying to figure out the Charlie Jones situation, but again, it seems like he's fine. That's just he was banged up a couple weeks ago, but should be good to go.
Yeah, Syracuse he got knocked out, and then of course came back for the fourth quarter and caught like 2 touchdowns and 150 yards.
The tilt from college football DFS lives on. All right. With that, I think we're good for today. We've gotten through it. Enjoy the week 5 slate. Everybody enjoy your weekend. The first weekend of October. If you like fall, it is officially here. And thanks to Micah for joining me. I am Justin. Thanks to Steve for producing behind the scenes for us as well. And good luck to his Mets tonight. Big game for them as they look to keep the upper hand on the NL East. I will be back later on this evening for the MLB Crunch Time show. Double duty for you tonight, and the last Saturday early wake-up call to write for baseball this year. So it's hard to believe it's playoff time already, but we have a few more days left of the regular season. So check out the baseball show later on tonight. We've also got our usual weekend coverage for NFL here on RotoGrinders. Plenty of stuff to keep you busy. Of course, also check us out, scoresandodds.com, for all your sports betting needs as well. Have a great rest of your weekend, everybody. For Micah, I'm Justin. We will see you back here next Saturday, same time, same place. See you, everybody.